Hey there, folks. Welcome back again. We are here with another episode of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. I think this is season 2, episode 6, or something along those lines. And we have with us today the one and the only Mr. Mobile. Michael Fisher is here with us. If you're going to be watching on the YouTubes, make sure you do all the YouTube things like and subscribe and all those things, and comment down below telling us how handsome we are, or
such as, or not.
I'm just giving you some ideas, or say something mean, because that's always fun too.
It's all engagement for content.
Yes, YouTube sees it all the same, or at least so they say. But yeah, so we're here. We're going to talk a little bit of foldables. I think a lot of people are now starting to call you Mr. Foldable.
Yeah, that's true.
Instead of not just Mr. Mobile, like getting more niche down.
I was just going to say, YouTube, the winning advice on YouTube has always been to niche down. And I think I've finally found the point at which those returns start to diminish because, thank God there's more than one foldable phone. Otherwise, I'd be out of business.
Yeah. Well, geez, if you lived in other than the North American continent, you'd have even more foldable phones to talk about.
True enough. Well, I talk about them all, as you know, regardless. Yeah.
Sometimes I get people who get mad at me for not talking about like the phones that aren't in this market, and I'm just like, well, 75% of my viewership is here.
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing because you do want to give people the information, but So how have you been, sir?
Oh man, tired. It's a strange thing. I always find it a little bit aggravating when a podcast guest is greeted and, well, how are you? Well, tired. It's been a very difficult period because how tough could it be? You're talking about cool nerdy stuff as a career, but it's been a phase of extensive energy spending on content that I can't produce this week. I've had a hell of a week. It's been really interesting. I look forward to telling you a little bit about it.
Yeah. The first thing I have on my list is foldable phones, because you are the de facto Mr. Foldable at this point.
Niche.
And
Yes.
so I have experience with some of the foldable phones, but not nearly as many as you. So I'm curious to see, I just finished rewatching a couple of your videos about the most recent crop of folds.
Okay.
Which makes me now want to ask, since we've got pretty much, I think, other than the OnePlus phone, pretty much everything we're going to see this year in foldables.
I cannot speak. I cannot confirm or deny.
So, okay, whether or not we are
for the US, for the US, yes, I think you're right. Yeah,
but my question is now, what if somebody said to you, Michael, I want to buy a foldable phone, and I'm really confused by other than the sizes and shapes, like what would be the best one to get? Let's talk about what you would recommend among the current crop for whatever reasons, because not every phone fits everyone.
Absolutely not. No. And what's interesting is that we will classify things like the Razor and the Fold, or the Flip and the Pixel Fold as, they're both foldables, yes. Yep. But they are such wildly different products that, I will occasionally see articles or videos that's like Galaxy Flip 5 versus Galaxy Fold 5. And I'm like, yeah, Maytag refrigerator versus Grady White powerboat. Yeah. Like, they're totally different. They're wildly different devices. So I think my question to your question is, like, if someone's trying to decide on a foldable, are they the kind of person who wants like a folding tablet for their pocket, or are they the kind of person who wants a smartphone that's standard that gets smaller?
Right. Yeah. And I know that. So, and you mentioned this in your Flip and Fold video. So I got the Fold 4, or the Flip 4 and the Fold 4 last year for review. And after the review period, I gave my Flip to my daughter.
Cool.
And within 6 months, the screen broke.
Did it? Spontaneous breakage, or was there an object in there?
Well, it was like a slow motion car accident. Like, she brought it home to me one day, and she's like half the screen was kind of going wonky. And then a couple of days later, it just wouldn't turn on. And so we got it replaced. And then I think that replacement phone lasted for 2 or 3 months.
And then the screen failed again?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And I've always been curious. I do keep an eye on Reddit to see how many people are complaining about stuff like that.
Yes.
But I haven't seen as much about the Fold 4 as I did about the Flip 4. And I've just had about a week with the Fold 5, but I haven't really touched the Flip 5.
Okay.
So one thing I can say, with the Fold 5 being kind of the same phone in like the bigger scope.
Yes, very much so.
I can say that it feels more solid to me. The hinge mechanism feels a little bit more smooth. It feels a little bit more refined than the Fold 4. And I don't know about the Flip because I haven't really tried it yet. So what would you say to the quality issue that Samsung has kind of struggled with on and off with these things?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. There's so much, you always have to be cognizant of how you're gathering the data and what kind of data you're getting.
Right.
Reddit's a great example. I track all those subreddits too. Those are places where people will never or very seldom go to say, like, have had my phone for 7 months and it's still working great. Like, nobody makes that post,
Right.
So all those customers you don't hear from. You only hear from the people with problems. So that already, yeah. Secondly, it's tough to gather data independently absent that. If you want to say, I don't want any anecdotal data, I just want to speak to the experiences I have, then you got to be like me. You've got to switch over and be carrying folding phones all the time, as many as possible, and using them as often as possible and waiting for one to break. I have never had a spontaneous screen failure, but I have only been able to use it's January 2020, call it, I don't know, 3 or 4 foldables a year on average. I mean, what have I been able to test? 12, 13 phones long term, and that's the most out of anyone that I know. Like, that's me being an insane person who wants to use these things all the time. So it's not enough of a sample size. So look, I think what I default to saying is the screens are objectively more fragile.
Oh yeah.
I just broke one. It wasn't a spontaneous failure. It was my fault. I dropped it while it was open and it broke. But also, when I'm not, I broke that because I was trying to replicate a one-handed flip movement for a shot, and the camera was in my way. It was a situation no normal user would ever find themselves in. And when I'm not doing that, I am closing it, putting it in my pocket, and when it's closed, the display is protected. And I say this all the time, but the one time I truly demolished a foldable before this was the Razer 5G, and I dropped that on the sidewalk, and everything broke on it. Everything broke on it that would have broken on a slab phone. The only thing that didn't break was the folding screen.
Oh.
So it's like, I just feel like the answer is not to make an indestructible folding phone. That's not the magic sauce that's going to make them take over the world. The trick is going to be for companies to get to an Apple level of service and repair with it, where it's like, I broke my flip phone. I can get it repaired easily and quickly at a carrier store or a U-break I fix. And that is the struggle that Samsung in particular has had. It's been leading the way, but it's demonstrated how difficult it can be to achieve a satisfactory level of service and repair, because that is what I see complained about all over the place.
Right. Yeah. And I've also seen a lot of people have struggles with Samsung in just like warranty coverage.
Yes.
Where they'll have what they deem to be a valid claim, and then have to sort of fight over it.
Absolutely. And it's not just Samsung. I think you could make the case that no manufacturer of an Android device has really stood out as being a brand that you can trust to take care of you in a way that is competitive. We have to address Apple. Apple is the direct competition. It is the visible competition. The iPhone is killing it. And what happens when you break your iPhone? Maybe do you have a bad experience at a Genius Bar once in a while? Sure. Most of the time, they take care of you.
And more often than not, what I hear from people is if they have like the current generation phone and they drop it and crack the screen or crack the back especially, they'll just walk in and they'll just give them a new phone.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And and I mean that's a level of comfort for something that you carry every day that is naturally fragile,
Hmm.
and then to just have the sense that you could walk into an Apple store and, well, I would have to go to Des Moines, but
Yeah.
you walk into the Apple store, or you send it back to them and they just replace it, and you don't have to have that anxiety of, you know.
Right.
And I wonder, I seem to talk about this all the time, but I was always fascinated by the two different business models of Apple and Microsoft, and
Hmm.
now Apple and Google, and then by that the all the rest of the Android manufacturers, because Apple is vertically integrated.
Yeah.
They do everything, the software, the hardware, and they
Right.
have control of it all the way down. Whereas Google is like Microsoft in the sense that they license their operating system out to the third party OEMs,
Hmm.
and so it's an easier task to be more responsive when there's not as many variables, I think.
Yeah, and I think that has these broader implications too, because you're right. It is like the Microsoft days, and that's still being repeated in the laptop world. Like, what do you see
Yeah.
on the Apple side? You see MacBook after MacBook that kind of looks just like the last one did, but they are insanely great, reliable, consistent machines. And then on the Windows powered side, you have all kinds of laptops made by all kinds of manufacturers, and they have different. They're not as consistent. They have different quality, like you know,
Right.
issues. But some of them are the most magnificent machines you can imagine. They'll like blow your mind. Like the review unit that I've managed to hold on to for way longer than I should have. This Zephyrus Pro Duo from
Oh
Asus
yeah.
that I'm using right now, with two screens, and just insane amount of cool stuff on it. Uh, and the Android world is the same, especially now that foldables have come in. It's like
Right.
no longer do we have to settle for gaming phones and other weird niche things. It's like if you want a folding phone, which really does change the way you use a phone and give you more opportunities to do computing on the go in different ways, you need to have an Android phone. You need to go with one of these less consistent, less service and repair oriented or
Right.
capable companies. Um, but a lot of people these days are saying, well, no, I just they say it to me all the time. They see my Razor every day, or they see my Flip 5 every day, and they say, God, that's cool. I always wanted those. And now I can mouth along with them as they say, but I've got an iPhone and I just can't give that up. And I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Like it's gotten to the point where I got annoyed with somebody the other day because I know where you're going. I know.
Yeah.
Thank you, stranger. I've had this conversation before.
Yeah, that is the heart. I mean, it still happens to me. So I've got the Pixel Fold and the Fold 5 and my iPhone just sitting here.
Yeah.
And it is so hard. There's some things that the iPhone only does.
Hmm.
And, it's not just iMessage. It's like once you start using the third-party apps like Notes and different things like that, it's so hard to give that up.
Yeah.
And so I find myself, even though like I want to immerse myself in using the folding phones to be able to really speak from an educated space, I still like I open it up and then I'm like, this would be easier to do on my iPhone.
Sure, because
And
you're used to that flow. You're used to
yeah,
you've become embedded in that ecosystem, right?
yeah. But that begs the question, does Apple make a folding phone in the nearish future?
I have heard, I don't know if he wants to be quoted on this, so I won't, but I've heard from someone that Apple has either placed an order or is about to place an order for some flexible displays from somebody.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean that makes sense to me. Like I knew everybody always knew that Apple was going to wait on this. They were
Yeah.
going to wait for everybody else to have their broken folding screens and their service and repair nightmares, and Apple was then going to come in later and be like, "Cool, it's a mature segment now. Now we will dominate, like we always do."
Yeah. It's like, okay,
Uh,
let us show you how it's done.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that'll happen. I think it's overdue, and I'm sure it will have some wonderful new maybe not new, but maybe, they'll come in and do some little corner of the flip phone experience or the folding phone experience with a way that's really very consistent or fluid or delightful or just, oh, wow. Oh, that's what I wanted. And I didn't even know it. That's what they specialize in. So I look forward to that. But I mean, would you get one if Apple made one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it would probably be instantly like my everyday phone forever,
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like, the way I look at it is Apple is a hardware company and a software company.
Yeah.
But above both of those things, they are a lifestyle company.
True.
And so consumer experience is, like, I think, something that they have nurtured and become very good at. Steve Jobs' whole idea for the Macs was we want it to be as easy to use for anybody as a toaster and as ubiquitous as a toaster.
Right.
It's like an appliance for the home that happens to be a computing device. And the iPhone does, the same thing is there with the iPhone. And I think, even though, again, my Windows versus Mac, customizability is what you get when you go with an Android phone.
Oh, yeah.
And user experience, a curated user experience, is what you get when you go to an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
And while some people balk and strain against that sort of, this is the way you do it in our operating system thing, I think by and large, one of the reasons that the iPhone continues to be successful has a lot to do with the fact that people can pick up an iPhone, use it for 5 years, pick up the new one, and it's the same experience.
No, absolutely it does. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot, even more than usual recently, because to get, I don't know, when you do something for, how long have you been doing this? Like,
since 2013.
Yeah, right. So for me, it's about 2012 or 2011. So it's like when you've been doing something for this long, which is talking about tech on the internet, you've been in it long enough to see something change. And that is one of the things that's changed, is that I used to make articles or videos talking about the way a new Android phone worked versus how the last one worked. And it mattered to a vast cross section of people in my market and in my age group. And now I make the same content, and it matters to a way bigger overall volume of people because my audience has grown. But the people who care about folding phones and Android phones and weird gaming phones and cameras are increasingly, I find, watching my stuff for entertainment and to in the same way that those strangers are like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I'm glad to know that exists. And then goes back to using their iPhone. And that's it's a very different feeling for me, because now it's like, I don't mind not helping as many people reach a buying decision, because that's not whatever. I was never passionate about that. I'm happy to entertain people by being like, hey, check it out. Here's this thing. It does some things well, it does things poorly. But it does suck that the stakes are gone now, because now it's like everybody treats their phone as a freaking, it's a thing you got to buy every so often, like a new faucet. It's a utility. And it's like, I hate that. I loved that little slice of time where the thing that I was passionate about was the thing that people would ask me about. And now they still do. They're like, oh, you review phones? What should I get the new iPhone 38? And I'm like, it's going to be like the 35. Yeah. What do you have? Oh, you have the 27? Yeah, it's still the same. Do you don't take a lot of photos? Oh, you don't care? Okay. Yeah, get the SE 14. Who the hell cares? They're all, it's like, that sucks. I hate very irrationally what the success of Apple has engendered in that respect. The complete commoditization of a segment that I really love nerding out about, where now it's as exciting as saying, like, yeah, buy this microwave instead of that one. Sure.
Yeah. Well, commoditization was always going to be not maybe an end result, but parity was going to come at some point. And I remember my first Android phone was a Samsung Captivate.
Oh, wow.
Which was really, really officially like the S1.
I was going to say it was the Galaxy S, right?
And that phone, there was so much cool about it. I never really used anything like it.
Hmm.
But oh my God, it was almost unusable.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like
Like
open an app, it crashes. You're like, "Oh, I'll try
yeah,
again."
I remember going to like Android Central's forum and figuring out how to root phones and do all this different stuff so that like whatever Samsung was trying to make it do would stop.
Yeah. Well, you basically have to overclock a phone back then to get it to operate well, because
Yeah,
and then your battery lasts 4 hours.
exactly. Exactly. And the thing is like there was definitely a difference in price and a difference in build quality up
Hmm.
to a certain point. And I feel like the Note 7 was a turning point, even though the Note 7 um, had its issues.
Right.
I feel like that's really when, around the time that Samsung began to say, okay, we're going to play the quality materials, great feeling phone kind of thing. No more plastic backs, no more any of that stuff, which apparently is coming back by rule of law.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember when it made that turn, and Samsung really brought up the quality of their phones, and other manufacturers did as well. Um,
Well, let's not rewrite it. I mean, HTC was out there
oh
doing
yeah,
incredible industrial design work, right? I
yeah. The
mean, for
HTC one was a great phone.
yeah, and you had Motorola doing interesting things with materials. Like Samsung was in many ways behind, and the Note 7
Hmm.
era or the S6 era was them finally getting up to parity. And that's
Yeah,
when I think a lot of people, those other manufacturers looked around and said, "Oh, now we have to worry because now they're paying attention. They're not just making
right,
another plastic piece of trash."
right,
Sorry, go ahead.
right. No, it's that is very true. It's sometimes it's easy to forget the players that were on the map who are no longer on the map. And in HTC's case, it's been a long time.
Yes, it has.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I still bemoan the loss of LG
Hmm.
and the V series phones and the great headphone jacks that they contained and all that kind of stuff. But you know, and the crazy thing to me is that LG was number 3 in the marketplace in North America when they quit making smartphones, because they were like, I think they were at like 10 or 11 or 12, some, I can't remember, but
I don't remember
a
what their
double
stats were.
digit percentage of the marketplace. And they left the marketplace, which speaks to just how huge the gap is.
Yeah, and their ability to look down the road, right, and
Right.
and look backwards a few years and say, well, here's what we've managed to do here, and it was thus far. And do we see any flash in the pan that's going to like, or not a flash in the pan? Do we see an ignition point in the
Right.
near future that's going to give us some more inertia? If not, I thought it was a good business decision they made. But I agree with you. I miss their disruptive influence. LG could always be counted on to do something weird a couple times a year. I always
They,
appreciated that.
they certainly went out with a bang.
Yes,
The
yes.
LG wing just kind of like, and here
Love
we
it.
go.
Yeah.
we're just gonna jump off, and this is gonna be our last little foray. But it
Oh,
was such a cool phone though, because
it
you could
was.
hold your phone in portrait mode and watch something in landscape.
Yeah. And
So
do a
easy.
little thing down there on your
Yeah.
secondary screen. And I think that's one of the reasons I like foldables is that they're kind of the LG wing in a way that more people can get. Like when I used to deploy the wing, I
Yeah.
mean, regular people would certainly come over and be like, I'm sorry, what did you just do?" And then I would explain it to them and they'd be like, "Awesome." And you knew that nobody was going to buy the thing.
Yeah.
Whereas with a foldable, like especially on a plane, I'll be sitting there with my Fold 4 or 5, and I'll be just reading a book or doing something, and people coming down the aisle to go to their seats will be like, "Oh my God, what is? So is that one of the? Tell me about." And I'm like, "Yeah," because it's real easy to explain to people. This replaced my Kindle, and it replaced
Right.
my iPad, and it is also my phone,
Yeah.
and that's pretty cool.
No, absolutely. I mean, I haven't been able to give up my Kindle because,
E-ink.
well, e-ink is one part of it, but it's also like I really bemoan the loss of single-use devices.
I totally get it. Yeah.
And the iPod I thought was a great way to listen to music. It's not the best way, but I still miss the days, of course, of sitting down in front of two giant speakers and putting a record on and reading the sleeve and all that,
Mm.
and listening to music was kind of an event. Like, you were partaking in an art form as opposed to it being sort of a passive thing in your
Right.
lifestyle. As
It was
you
a
know,
destination unto itself.
right,
Yeah.
right. But the
Yeah.
iPhone, I thought I thought liberated the music experience in a way that it hadn't been. The Walkman was cool, but cassette tapes were not optimal. CD player, like portable CD players, were cool, but not optimal until they figured out how to buffer long enough that you weren't
Skipping
skipping
all
all
over
the
the
time.
place. Yeah. Well, I put in the mini disc. You can't leave the mini disc out. That
No,
was my
it's
favorite portable medium.
yeah, no. The mini disc was awesome, and one of those things that I never quite understood why it didn't get further down the road.
Yeah.
Um, I knew somebody who had a mini disc like Walkman,
Yeah.
and it seemed like the perfect combination of the cassette. Oh, there you go. There you
I
go. Yeah,
love this thing so much. Yeah, I've had it for so long. Oh, I've still got a mini disc in here.
there you go.
Summer 2000 mix. Nice.
Yeah, it's really, it was a CD and a cassette. It didn't have the fragility of the CD, and it had some of the nice sort of portable aspects of the cassette.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Buffered so much better than a Discman of the same period did.
Mhm.
It didn't. I remember dropping it on the pavement. It didn't even skip then.
Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah. But I think also at around that time, around 2000, was when digital, in terms of MP3s and stuff like that, were starting to really impact the music industry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just remember when I was in New York and I first started playing shows and I put my band together, um, the the record label system was still pretty healthy. I mean, we're talking like just post grunge, so the labels were kind of flush with money and looking for the next thing. And fast forward like another 2 or 3 or 4 years, and Napster happens, and it's just like with every other physical medium, physical entertainment medium at that time. They had to start to make the choice of, do we ride this until it dies, or do we try and adapt?
Yeah.
And the major label system became very different around year 2000, because they weren't getting the budgets, and the labels weren't taking risks on artists. And we had American Idol, and everything was really sort of compressing into what we really still have now in the music industry, which is a lot of very safe pop music on the charts,
Yeah. Well, no question
and
about that.
the interesting stuff kind of being on the fringes. It's easier to be on the fringes now because the internet has been the great equalization.
Democratizer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it any easier. So it's just very interesting.
Now you bring that up. I gotta say I remember the Napster period very well. I remember being like an 18 or 19-year-old at that point, and when Metallica famously took their stand against it. Pretty much everyone. I think the entire public sentiment at that time was that they were old, out of touch, rich guys trying to get richer. Like everyone my age at least was saying that, but there was always a little pie slice in my head that felt weird about the fact that all of this music that I had formerly had to spend a lot of money for, I was getting for free. And the entire novelty of the internet was like masking the fact that it was essentially stealing stuff.
Right.
So that sucked. So when iTunes came out, and when Apple launched iTunes and the music store, and you could spend $1 a song and get music, 99 cents per track. That to me was I loved it. I spent so much money on music because it was not only fast and reliable, and you weren't going to download like a Goatsy image when you're trying to get like a Weezer track,
Right.
but you were actually participating in the economy of supporting artists, which I felt better about. But I feel like now we've made this pivot into this world where I love Spotify. Okay. As a user, Spotify is wonderful to me. I do not give one damn about audio fidelity. I'm sorry. You and I are different in that way. You could compress it to 28 kilobits per second. I'm like, sounds great, man. But so I love the convenience of Spotify, but everything I've heard about them, their rates to artists, is just laughable.
Yeah. No, it's
That
true.
sucks.
And one thing that I think got lost in translation with the Metallica thing was, I think they saw themselves on some level, or at least maybe looking back in history, you could see on some level that Metallica had the platform as one of the biggest bands in the world to say, this is stealing and that's not cool. Yeah. And it, in the hopes that it would have a trickle down effect to the artists that didn't have their same level of a platform, because it did contract considerably and has remained that way. And while I love the convenience of, I'm more of an Apple Music person, just because Apple Music used to be Beats Music, which used to be Mog. You remember Mog?
Mog. I haven't heard that name in a long time.
I went to Mog because its algorithm pointed you toward albums and not songs or playlists.
Got it.
And it just felt more like the way that I'd always listen to music. And so Apple Music still has a little bit of that left in it. And but what ends up happening is, like, I used to buy music all the time. I had 1,500 CDs at one point.
Damn.
And I mean, a lot of it was, I lived in New York and I knew people in the industry, and they would give me, like, my old drummer was the head of a record label, and I would walk into his office on an afternoon and he'd just give me a stack of like 15 CDs that his label was putting out that quarter or whatever. And so, but
I love that.
I used to love the collecting part of it. Go to the store, dig through the stacks, all that kind of stuff. I don't do that at all anymore.
Yeah. Do you do it virtually?
It's not the same thing. Like, I do sometimes, but there's not the investment. If you go out and you have a budget of enough to buy like 2 or 3 CDs or 2 or 3 records or whatever, and that's going to be your new music for that month or whatever, then, I mean, you listen to that music. You put you put it in your car, you put it in your disc player or whatever, and you get to know every track on that record.
Absolutely. And the mediocre ones, you give them a couple playthroughs, you kind of get to like them a little more. And then the ones you liked initially, you're like, oh, this isn't actually that great. Hey, that weirdo track 9 is actually pretty good. I hated it for 3 months, but it's a different kind of immersion, right?
You had to invest yourself in the product.
Yeah.
And now, like, I know that there's still great music that comes out, and it's probably partially like an age thing too, but because everybody, what ends up happening is, and I don't think people realize this, when you get to, well, I'm 51 now. So when you get to that point, you've already seen like 3 10-year cycles of this band being influenced by that band, being influenced by that band, by, just going back 50 years.
Right.
And so when I heard back in the 2000s, when I heard bands like Interpol, it's like, okay, I've heard New Order, Bauhaus, like, all of these bands that seem like brand new to everybody else who's 10 years younger than I am.
Yeah. Whereas for me, Interpol was a new experience.
Yeah.
Like, I had heard those bands, but I had no context for how to connect them. So you're right. Yeah. When the older you get, the more you see that kind of cyclic nature repeating itself over and over. Right.
But I really do miss the whole curation of a record collection or a CD collection, and that real sense of, like, I'm going to put on this record and I'm going to, like, experience it.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of, that informs a little bit what we were talking about earlier about the commodification of smartphones, right? We're like, I think there's a lot of pop music now that is not very challenging. I think that has always been the case. That doesn't try to change anything. It just sets out to give you a bop. But some of my favorite criticism in media has always been music criticism. I will read reviews of albums that I have never heard and have no intention of listening to, because there's just something about the value of that stands out to me, of this usually 500 to 1,000 word condensed take on like, this is good for these reasons, or this is bad for these reasons. And the thing that kind of most people are fine with in the absence of that,
right,
is not something I can relate to. Like whether it's food or music or phones or whatever, like the vast majority of people who are just like, yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, did you have that? Did you like the burger there? Yeah, it was all right. Do you watch that show on HBO? Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm like, no, have an opinion. Like,
well, I think that's then you can fold social media into that as well,
eh,
because I think a lot of people, that there's been a homogenization of opinions. And my dogs are barking now, Mike.
yeah, they have an
But
opinion.
but there's been this, everybody gets their news and their opinions from their Facebook feed, or their Twitter feed or X or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but they get this stuff fed to them on social media, and it's more effective than television was at sort of spoon feeding an ideology or an opinion.
Oh yeah. And you can feel it happen in yourself too. Like if you're me, you can like, I will see a take that I know that ideologically, given the bulk of my opinions, I should agree with, and my reflexive reaction is to be like, yeah, cool, amplify, +1, whatever. But if I actually stop to think, if something distracts me from the feed and I look up for 2 seconds, I come back to it and I'm like, actually, I kind of don't agree with. I'm like 60% on board with this, and I have a much more nuanced opinion about it. But social media is not built for nuance. It's built to have you read the headline and develop a plan of action based on the headline and never click into the article.
Yeah, it's very interesting to do the social media thing and realize that it is sort of a blunt instrument.
Yes.
I mean, I've learned that in my career as somebody who creates stuff for social media. Like, nuance is often not even noticed.
Yeah.
And which is, I mean, there's a place for everything.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that like music journalism was amazing at a time when just even people like Grail Marcus and David Frick and so many of these music journalists who were really talking about our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And the music was an extension of the culture, and the culture sort of had its own sway, go one way or the other, and you could really feel the differences, and you could experience the differences, and you could take one side or the other.
Yeah.
And now I don't know. I mean, it seems more like the great race toward the middle than anything else. And I don't think anybody notices that they're doing it, especially since like political discourse has been so divisive for the past, half a decade or more, that nobody wants to touch it.
And also the economic reality of the situation is also a race to the middle too, because if you're going to create art and you want to create art as a source of income, if you want to be a professional artist, then most people have to find a way to appeal to the greatest number of people, right? So that's the real bummer. Like the great joke about the main character in the newsroom in the first episode, like, you're popular because you don't offend anyone. Like that's the best way to get popular. Like as someone who has a YouTube channel that initially I thought I'd like to build to be as big as possible, I don't want to do that anymore, because you have to. It's not that I'm worried about offending people, but you have to like. You do have to decide that you can't be as much of a nerd as you want to, or if you're an artist, you can't be as far out on the extremes as you want to be, because you're going to sacrifice a ton of audience. And it's like, it sucks to have to do that because of the economic pressure of like, well, we are in a nation where the median rent is $2,000 a month, and people are demanding $80,000 to consider moving jobs because that is what it takes to survive in America today. And it's like, it's all interconnected in a very sad way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when I used to teach, I used to go all the way back to World War II. and sort of take the idea of the American dream as it existed prior to World War II, or maybe prior to the 20th century, and what it became post World War II.
Mm.
You know, because the United States was pretty isolationist and not really like mixing with the world all that much. And we had this, manifest destiny idea of like the American dream is achieving as much as you can achieve in whatever you choose to achieve, and it wasn't really tied so much to financial or material type things. Yeah. But post World War II, as we had, we built this whole means of production to defeat the Axis, and then the war ends, and it's like, well, we don't need to do that anymore, so let's make washing machines.
Right.
and then television really started to impact that, because you would see the television advertisement of somebody, they've got the new Philco television in their living room and it's color, and look at how happy their family is, right? And the white picket fence with 2.5 kids and a car in the garage and another one in the driveway and and then now I got a 30-inch television. Now I got a 75-inch television.
Yeah.
And people, like, not to any fault of their own. I'm not saying people are at fault. I mean, advertising is extremely powerful.
Oh, 100%.
Really smart people have been working in advertising for a super long time. And if you wanted to connect to tech, one of the pillars of Apple's success is their uncanny ability to sell their products.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And so, when you look at it now, the internet is just a much better version of television.
Oh, yeah.
That's anything that you want all the time.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's also that idea that you have to go toward the middle if you want to have success. And, I mean, I've struggled with this. I've had issues across the whole time that I've done YouTube, because, maybe I'm naive or whatever, but I was like, I'm going to say what I think. And then I say what I think, and companies didn't like it.
Oh.
But at the same time, like, I wouldn't want to give up one for the other.
Yeah.
Because the choice that you have to make is like, okay, do I want to do it the way that, it looks in my head, or do I want to do it the way that, I'm still doing it and, making a living. I'm not making as much money as I could.
Yeah.
I'm not doing as well as I could be. I'm not traveling to as many events. I'm not doing, this, that, or the other thing, but I'm still doing it,
Yeah, and there's real value in that, because it's funny. My brother was the most recent one to ask it, but certainly wasn't the only one. When I was really into the Flip 5G or the Flip 3 or whatever, I was really just waxing poetic about a Samsung smartphone. And my brother was just like, you ever think about just going to work for Samsung? Because I'm sure you could do very well there. And I'm like, no, I've never thought of that, because the great appeal of the job for me is to be able to say, like, I use this for a week and here's what I think. And no one is going to tell me to mitigate that or moderate that or change it, or like, and maybe my opinion is unpopular, but you know what? Here it is. I'm going to say it. That is almost an aphrodisiac to me.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's value in that. And I say, don't lose sight of that.
And I will say this, you're extremely deft at doing both things. Like, you have a broad appeal, but yet you don't sacrifice the criticism. And I think your
Thanks.
criticism is a little bit more finely focused than a lot of other people who have channels your size.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's funny because I feel the opposite way when I watch other people's videos, which I do rarely, but I'll watch other people's reviews and I'll be like, yep, that's 8 things that I missed. I should have put them in this. I shouldn't have cut that. But I freaking knew it. And then I just, but that's the creative life, right?
That's the way it always is. Yeah. It's like, it's very, I like doing this for a living. But I think it's also one of those things where I probably enjoyed it more when I didn't.
Yeah, when it was a hobby still.
Yeah. And one thing that I'd be interested to know is, maybe we're getting inside baseball now, but I'd be interested to know how you feel about this. I, I've now been doing this for 10 years, very seriously for 7 or so. And now that I've gone through several of these tech cycles year after year, I look at the future and I say, like, how do I scale what I'm currently doing to, be something that could maybe build more wealth or, expand into something that I had a little bit more control over. And the unique aspect of doing something like mostly reviewing products is, for me, it seems like there's not a real scalability where I can go beyond what I'm doing right now. I can get better at what I'm doing now. I could probably make more money at what I'm doing now.
Sure.
But beyond creating my own online magazine or something like that, it seems like, as I start to think, well, yeah, 15 or so years, I'm going to be a really old person.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And, I look at people like Leo Laporte and Steve Dotto and guys like, who have really been doing this for a long time. And like, I've been looking at the YouTube education side of things. Yeah. I love teaching. I taught creative writing for 10 years after grad
That's
school.
right. Yeah.
And I love teaching, which is the real reason I started down that path to get the MFA degree.
So do you think you would want to do that?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, it has its own sort of little things that wouldn't be so awesome to deal with, but I could scale it out to where, write books, create courses, work one-on-one, do group learning things. And to me, that seems like it would have a diversity that what I'm doing now doesn't have. Like, I don't get, you travel a lot of people who do this, who, especially, you've been doing it for a long time, very seriously. So you get to travel a lot more, and you get to have a more diverse experience than I do.
Definitely. Yeah. But even so, it still stagnates. It doesn't it all of that. It doesn't matter what it is. It gets old.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. Like, I kind of made a decision. Well, the pandemic helped, but I just was kind of like, I don't really like traveling.
I think a lot of people came to that conclusion as a result of the pandemic. Yeah.
But for me, I just think it was, I used to tour with my band and stuff, and I enjoyed that, but I got to a point in my life where it wasn't nearly as fun anymore. I'm old and creaky and want to get my sleep.
Right.
I've been stuck in Chicago O'Hare Airport overnight just enough times to know that that's not what I want to do when I'm
not your ideal Thursday night.
No.
Yeah.
But where do you see your career, I guess, going from what you've built to this point?
I have never, ever been able to answer that question. It's in the same family of question, the interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or the high school question when you're a student of like, what would you like to do for a career? The reality is that I have had I did not have a privileged upbringing by any means, but I have had an immensely privileged career trajectory, which has involved me working hard for sure, but also being around for the rise of these platforms that enabled YouTube, to do things that you want to do and make a living at it. So these things have kind of arisen before me for me to kind of step onto. And I don't, because the next, what would you call it? Thing that frogs hang out on, lily pad,
yeah.
Because the next lily pad has not yet floated up to the surface in the murk in front of me, I just continue to blindly kind of trough forward. And I don't know. It is complicated by a fact that we don't have enough time to go into this, but I don't own the Mr. Mobile brand. I am its caretaker, and I am a little island, but it is owned by Future, a giant multinational corporation. Right. So like, that really muddies the waters even further, because I love they treat me well, and I'm comfortable. But what does that look like when you're looking at guys like Marquez, whom I admire and have always admired, who's truly building an empire, and so it's but I don't know. Then you review the Fold 5, and look, even Mr. Foldable. There is a reason I do not have a Galaxy Fold 5 review, and it's because it takes an enormous amount of effort to try to say anything new about a product about which you can say very little that is new, especially when you've said things over and over and over again for 11 years. So I just don't know.
Yeah. I originally wasn't going to get the Fold 5 because I watched the event. And I watched, some people's sort of previews of it that they'd been able, like yourself, been able to spend some time with it. And I was just like, wow, that's the same phone.
Yeah.
And I used the Fold 4 pretty extensively last year, but I decided to get it just because I wasn't going to get the Pixel Fold, but then I did. And I was glad that I got it because it gave me a view into a different form factor.
Yes.
Compared to like the Fold line, the Z Fold line.
Totally different approach. Yeah.
And that was intriguing enough to me that I wanted to then compare it to the newest Samsung offering. And the thing that I can say about the Fold 5 is that it's more different than I thought it would be. It's not.
In what way? Like, are you using those extra icons in the taskbar a lot? Are you making an S Pen drawing every day? What are you doing?
Well, so that's the thing. I mean, there's not anything that I can really point to say this is generationally different, but it feels better to me, having not had the Fold 4 for a little while and then picking this up. It feels better. The lack of the thigh gap.
Do you call it the thigh gap?
I do. Yeah. But just that little thing changed the feel of it in my hand to the point where it is a different experience, maybe more pleasurable experience. But here's what I've discovered with myself and foldables. When I first pick it up the first week, I'm like, this is cool. This is, and then after a week or so, I'm kind of like, okay, now what?
The novelty wears off quickly for you?
It does. And you start to find the small things. With the Pixel Fold, for me, it was the battery life. It just killed it for me. Because I was getting to, 8 or 9 p.m. and hitting 20%, knowing I had another 3 or 4 hours before I was planning to put it on the charger.
Sure.
And as somebody who reviews these things, like I can't tell somebody it's like a super great phone because it does all these cool things and it's a new take on the design, and you should go get it when the battery is not what it should be.
Yeah, and we could go into that a lot. The Pixel Fold, there's a lot. That's a very first generation sort of weird product that I don't think Google cares if you buy or not. But yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think for them it's proof of concept.
Yeah,
and another iron in the fire. And
developer relation, commitment to a category kind of thing. But that's what another thing, man, is that's what makes it so weird. It's I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about the job because I think I've said enough times I love the job. But when you get to a place like I'm at, dude, I have the Pixel Fold over here. I have the Galaxy Fold 5 over here. I want to carry the Pixel Fold all the time for two reasons. I've used all the China market foldables as well. So I've got this broader library of what's possible, and Samsung is just so stagnant. And also the novelty thing, the Fold 5 feels like the Fold 4 felt like the Fold 3.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it. I'm bored. I want something new. I want this widescreen thing. I want to see what it does. I want to watch apps get confused and figure it out. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate the thing that myself wants, the gadget nerd Michael Fisher wants, from Mr. Mobile, who's got to put his vest on and be just all right, shut up. What actually matters, and let's make a real video about it, right? But you don't it seems to me that you do both things. you will go back and forth and you'll do a personal essay. And I think I'm getting to the point where I have to do that now because that's the only content that I can pull out of this. Because it's like the foldable space, when it gets to a Fold 4 to Fold 5 sort of evolution, there isn't much evolution there. And it feels like you're talking Moto G versus Moto G. And it's like, no, this is too young a category to be this iterative.
And that's kind of my last question as we sort of round out to bookend this now with foldables, I guess.
Sure.
I think that the anticipation of foldables 5 years ago was that it was going to potentially be a sea change, a paradigm shift, something that breathed new life into smartphones, or at least gave it enough variety for interest, because it has sort of flattened out. I would say like 2018-ish was where all smartphones got good. And then, and so it was no longer like this one works better than this one.
Right.
It was like, well, they're all good. And so the foldables seem to me like a potential thing that would differentiate and excite the market.
Yeah.
Does it have a future as that? Does the foldable have a future as like potentially being the next stepping stone beyond a slab phone? Or is the slab phone still like the best that we've done? Is the question for me, because I want to know what is the next smartphone, because the smartphone was the technology for the 2010s, like 2005-ish to 2002 or 2022 or something like that.
Yeah.
So what is the next thing?
Well, I think there's two parts to that question. Like the first part is I think foldables did what you're saying. I think look, sales numbers. You can set whatever goals you want to decide whether they actually achieved their objective or not. I think foldables for most people have made smartphones more exciting. I think I agree. Like by 2018, they were as exciting as cordless phones, right? It's like, oh God, they're all whatever. So it is a more exciting thing now, and I see that in the normal people that come up to me on the street and that talk to me at coffee shops, and like they all get excited one way or the other, whether they're for or against it. And no matter how much they love their boring iPhone, they love talking about the foldables at least. So I think the foldables have done that. But on a broader thing, like beyond the smartphone, this is a little thing that I'm going to say next week at IFA when we have a little panel discussion about the future of this. I had a wonderful experience recently at Mystic Seaport, which is a kind of one of these old American towns that they've left in its 1800s form. And there's a little antique shop, and I went in there, or a watch shop, and I saw all these pocket watches for sale, not really for sale. And I asked about one, expecting, and I think pocket watch, man, I don't know about you, I think 1912, I think Titanic times, that's what I associate with the pocket watch. This thing looked like a pocket watch that you would have pulled off the wreck of the Titanic, and it was from 1770.
Right.
That form factor had not changed all that much in 130 years.
Right.
So I am really excited for the evolution of the personal area network. Your watch talks to your glasses, talks to a projector on your chest, talks to your shoes, whatever. But I don't think we're going to outgrow the need for something in our pocket that acts as basically a portable screen for a long, long time. And I think the easiest way to maximize the utility of that screen is to make it a foldable, or perhaps in the future a rollable. Because I think this slab smartphone that we're working with now will seem very archaic in 10 years when they can all at least change shape somehow. Because the reality is sometimes you want it this big, sometimes you want it this big. And material science is finally getting us there. So I still think they're the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially, taking it back to something like the pocket watch, which, was it reached commoditization like long before, and
long before the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, its utility remained the same.
Right.
And there was nothing that surpassed it really until like the wristwatch really matured.
Right. And it took a war to get everyone on board with the wristwatch.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting when you think like you've got smartwatch, we've got AR glasses, and you've got the phone, whatever form factor it takes. I see the potential for the smartwatch and the phone to kind of meld together.
Sure.
And, whether it's sort of you wear it as a cuff or something like that, I
Mhm.
see a lot of potential in the form factor kind of changing. But you're right. I think people still need to have kind of something that they can hold in front of them.
Yeah.
And
Humane, right? We should mention Humane has
yeah,
this interesting idea of this projector thing that you wear, and it kind of the UI gets projected on something else, whether that's your hand or something. And I think that's a possible future evolution of what you're talking about, because I
right.
agree with you. Making the phone wearable will be
Yeah.
will probably be a phase of this.
And that's one thing that I got excited about when Vision Pro was announced. I was just
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, we've all seen science fiction that does
Hmm.
these things, right?
Yeah.
And so we have the ideas implanted in our head. A lot of people are saying like, well, Vision Pro isn't practical. Nobody's going to walk around with goggles on their face,
Right.
and that's true for sure. But what I look at is like, okay, Vision Pro when it comes out is sort of like, to me, like the Samsung Captivate or the original iPhone, which way overpriced and will definitely underperform in some way, shape, or form,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But the 5 to 10 year payoff, I've said to people who say, well, I'm never going to pay that much money for that. I've said to them, well, it's like, you're not going to pay that much money for it because you're going to 5 or 10 years later pay that much money for the Vision SE.
Right. You're going to pay a tenth that for
Yeah.
something that's 4 times as capable. Yeah. This is just the first step.
Yeah. And that's what I keep trying, as we talk about platforms like YouTube and how they've given us opportunities to do things with, there wasn't really a marketplace for the kinds of things that we do now other than traditional journalism, be it
Right.
television or print, right? And
Yep.
that was a much smaller world with much taller gatekeepers.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
At least we've been able to kind of build our own fate to a certain extent with
Hmm.
these platforms, and everybody always brings their hands about like YouTube is this is gonna happen and YouTube is gonna crash, or it's
Right.
now it's gonna be TikTok or whatever. But I think ultimately there's always going to be something, even in the depths of like right now we're definitely in a slump with tech, whether it's a product of the pandemic and consumer behavior, or it's supply lines still getting themselves worked out or something. I just get the sense that people aren't as excited about tech maybe as they were pre-pandemic. And
Yeah.
then the pandemic brought a somewhat artificial boom that
Right.
no one anticipated. So I hope that the next thing is something that really molds these things into something that's recognizable as a whole and not an individual thing, I guess.
I think like a lot of things, it's a pendulum swing.
Yeah.
I think we've been in lulls, we've been in boom times, and that's goes to your earlier point about just cycles, right?
Yeah.
I think we just gotta. I don't know that it will be a new category that spurs the next wave of, oh my god, awesome growth. Maybe it'll be a lot of different things. Maybe, but one of the things that keeps me enthusiastic about the space is that I am confident there will always be a next thing
Mm-hmm.
to get excited about, and not just because we're jaded and bored tech reviewers, but because like, no, this is a thing that a lot of people are going to care about,
Right.
or this is a thing that a lot of people are going to think they care about, and you know might not be good for a lot of people, and that's part of our job too. So
Well, I mean, when we look at AI and its potential for disruption,
yeah.
that's certainly something. But I mean, that's something that I think will impact what we do. But I don't want to be like an AI doomsayer and cry from the hilltops like the sky is falling because AI is. I mean, I think it's interesting like what it can bring on, but I don't think anybody understands it enough yet on a larger scale.
Yeah,
You know,
it's practical applications are not fully sussed out yet at all. I mean,
right?
it's amazing how quickly people built it into their workflows. That's for sure. Like couldn't believe it when people were telling me that they used AI to write a counter pitch to a sponsor pitch they got in their inbox. And I'm like, really? You're actually like using this live? That's amazing. Because that's a pretty low stakes thing. Like, and you're basically just asking it to fill out boilerplate. But the more I hear about use cases like that, the more I'm like, AI is just generating more of the fluff that I hate, whether it's content or communications or whatever.
Right.
It's like, oh, this email seems too short. Let me use ChatGPT to pad it out. No, just send one sentence. It's fine. Brevity.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. I think when ChatGPT adds that, like, do you want more? And then it just fills out more stuff. I tried it out. Like, as a writer, I was like, okay, I got to see what this is all about. And I had it try, like, write me a script giving me 3 pros and 3 cons of the 2013 Mac Pro.
Okay.
In like a blog post form.
Yeah.
And it did, but it got a lot of stuff wrong. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Something like that. As a writer, I hate to see people like giving the reins of writing over to an artificial intelligence, especially when, our grasp of the English language has suffered so.
Indeed. Yeah. But, in some way, it's an example of something that hasn't changed a lot. And this will be our last thing, I think.
Yep.
But about 8 years ago or 7 years ago, I was on a train in Germany with another YouTuber way bigger than I was. And he had a lot of email and comment traffic to reply to.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that he had hired more than one person to essentially just be a staff to imitate him, to use his tone and interact with the commenters so that his engagement would be higher. And I'm like, wait, you trained them to type like you? He's like, yeah. To, express themselves like you? He's like, yeah. And that's what people are doing with ChatGPT. But even then I knew, I'm like, I see why that makes sense if you want to save some time and you have a lot of money. Also, that is never the channel I want to build. That is never the interaction with people I want to have. And ChatGPT is like, I never want to use any of the content, anything like that spits out as anything that I want to put in my mouth.
Right.
So, that's fine.
Yeah. I think the power is in the user and not the tool.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you know what you're doing and you know what you want out of it, then I think that you can get something without sacrificing your principles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm using a service called Munch to chop up long form videos into short form content.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives me, I put in a long form video and it gives me back like 10 or 15 less than 1 minute chunks. And I'll choose 2 or 3. And then that saves me all the effort of going through and picking stuff out or hiring someone to pick something out, and
Right.
It's not perfect, but from my standpoint, it's kind of like, well, I want to have more content. I'm still curating it, and I want to have more stuff getting into YouTube, because I think one thing that I suffered from was that I didn't create as much content when I was focused on Amazon, and that's where I was making the majority of my money.
Right.
So now I'm trying to like get YouTube to push me back up to where I was, and more content seems like a good idea.
Well, then you have the existential cost of, you're creating short form content, which is destroying the world. How do you sleep at night, Jason?
Not well, honestly, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, we should talk about. No, I'm glad. I was actually going to say the opposite. I'm really pleased that you are doing that, because ever since I took a week or 2 off from social media, just incidentally, I was away.
Right.
I'll tell you, I've not been able to come back to it in a way that is meaningful from a content creation standpoint. Like I have the Instagram form of writer's block, Right. I stage a phone on a set with the fake plant and the keys and the wallet and the surroundings, a little bit in the sun. And then I'm like, I can't shoot it, because I'm like, I've seen this photo 175,000 times. I'm not going to contribute to it. So I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
In that world.
And it's like you said before, some of it is fluffy, in an Instagram case, it's eye candy, right?
Yeah.
And so you try and mix and match colors and textures to draw somebody's eyeballs in,
Right. Yeah.
And that's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
And I've decided that I'm no longer going to think all that much about it. I'm just, there's some things that I'm just going to say, this is what it's going to be.
This is the price of entry.
And then the stuff that I focus more of my thought and energy on is on the other side of that coin.
Yeah.
Because I realized this year starting out that I had a lot more things that I want to do, and I haven't been doing as much as I need to do. So I have to start triaging things and making decisions that take some things off of my plate.
Yeah.
And because I want to do music stuff that I haven't done. I haven't done it. And so it's learning to maximize the potential of what I have. Because right now I can't afford to hire 3 or 4 people to pretend to be me.
Yeah. This is one of those things that you assume you'll one day figure out until you're having this conversation over beers with your friend, in my case, David Kogan. Yeah. And you're like, wait a minute, hold on, stop. We've talked about this, but no, we've talked about this 18 times before. Okay, got it. We're never going to figure it out, are we? No, we're not. Okay,
no, because the board changes.
Yeah, the game keeps changing. Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, let's go ahead and wrap up here. I think we could continue to talk about this for about another 2 or 3 hours. And
yeah, this has been a fun existential crisis to share with you. Thank you.
Hey man, I'm all about the existential crises.
No, it's been great, and it has been too long. So thanks for inviting me on, man.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you were able to do it, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I know the audience is going to enjoy it.
Likewise. So, well, they will, as long as you chop off the first 10 minutes about that New York shit they don't care about.
Yeah, I'll think about it. Either that, or I'll just challenge them to get to the good stuff.
Good idea.
Yeah. Okay, you have to listen to 10 minutes of New York talk that you won't
understand. Eat your vegetables, right, before you have your dessert.
Yeah, but no, this has been very good. I appreciate it, man. So all of you out there, please, if you don't already, which I can't imagine, go over and follow Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile, on all of the various social media places.
Yeah, the Mr. Mobile on YouTube, and Captain Two Phones, Captain with the number 2 in the middle of the word Captain and Phones.
Yeah.
There's a shorter way to say that. I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, you're like Captain 6 Phones now.
Yeah, I need to buy some new handles.
Anyway, thank you so much, folks. This has been the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. We'll be back again next week with someone. I don't know who yet. So that's where I am with that.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks to Michael Fisher for being here. Thank you all for listening. Until the next time, I'm out.